The Last Guardian. The crimson emergency lights bathed Outpost Vega's command center in an eerie glow. Commander Tellurian of the Galactic Assembly stood motionless, his forearms gripping the tactical console as he watched the holographic display. Dozens of friendly markers vanished in rapid succession, each representing hundreds of lives extinguished in an instant. "Sir, the outer defense grid is down. The Seraphim fleet has been obliterated." Lieutenant Nix's voice cracked as she delivered the report. Her iridescent scales had dulled with exhaustion after 36 hours of continuous battle. Tellurian's second heart began to beat faster, a physiological response his species developed for moments of extreme stress. "What about the evacuations?" 40% complete. The civilian transports need at least 3 more hours. "Time we don't have," Tellurian muttered, mandibles clicking in frustration. The Voidborn had appeared 18 cycles ago, emerging from the darkness between galaxies. They weren't a conventional species, but rather a collective consciousness inhabiting synthetic bodies that could adapt to any environment. Their motives remained unclear. They didn't negotiate, communicate, or take prisoners. They simply consumed, converted, and continued their inexorable advance through assembly space. The Assembly, a coalition of 87 spacefaring species, had never faced such an enemy. Their military doctrine, technology, and tactics, developed over thousands of years of conventional warfare, proved ineffective against the Voidborn. One by one, the outer colonies fell. Then the border worlds. Now they were losing core systems. "Commander," called Science Officer Ilara, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with urgency. "The Voidborn fleet has altered its formation. They're preparing for another assault." On the display, thousands of Voidborn vessels, each an unsettling blend of organic and mechanical components, rearranged themselves into a formation resembling a massive spearhead aimed directly at the outpost. "How much time?" Tellurian asked. 20 minutes, perhaps less." Tellurian's gaze swept across the command center. His crew, representing 12 different species, continued their duties with grim determination despite knowing what was coming. They were the last line of defense protecting the evacuation of Vega Colony's 3 million inhabitants. "Lieutenant Nix, transmit our tactical data to Assembly High Command." Science Officer Ilara, continue evacuation protocols. Security Chief Corvin, prepare all remaining personnel for emergency departure. Tellurian's orders were met with silent nods. As his crew carried out their duties, Tellurian retreated to his private terminal and initiated a secure connection to the Assembly Council. The holographic projection revealed 7 figures, the remaining council members from what had once been a body of 21 representatives. "Commander Tellurian," acknowledged High Counselor Jen, her ancient face lined with worry. "We've been monitoring your situation. The outpost will fall within the hour, Counselor. The evacuation is still underway." "We understand your situation, Commander. However, we've called to discuss something else entirely." Jen's voice took on a grave tone that made Tellurian's spines bristle with apprehension. "The Council has made a decision," she continued, "one that wasn't reached lightly." Another counselor, a gaseous entity contained within a specialized environment suit, moved forward. "We're activating the Omega Protocol." Tellurian felt his blood run cold. The Omega Protocol was theoretical, a last resort measure discussed only in the most classified sessions. "Counselor, that's no longer theoretical," interrupted a third counselor, his crystalline structure refracting the light. "The encryption key has been transmitted to your personal command codes." Tellurian's terminal chimed, confirming receipt of the classified data. "You're asking me to contact them." "We're asking you to save what remains of our civilization," Jen replied. "The Assembly is failing, Commander. Our final strategic projections estimate total collapse within 6 months." "But the humans," Tellurian's voice trailed off. The word itself felt forbidden. "We're banished for good reason," the crystalline counselor acknowledged. "But we need those reasons now." We need what made them so dangerous. The coordinates for their homeworld are in the encrypted file, Jen explained, along with authentication codes that should bypass their defensive systems, if any still exist. No one has had contact with them since the banishment, Tellurian said. We don't even know if they've survived. The monitoring beacons at the edge of their quarantine zone have detected technological activity consistent with an advanced civilization, said the gaseous counselor. They're still there, Commander, and they may be our only hope. The tactical display behind Tellurian flashed a warning. The Voidborn had accelerated their approach. Their time was running out faster than anticipated. I'll do it, Tellurian said, his resolve hardening. But I want it on record that I consider this an existential gamble. Noted, Commander. May the Founders guide us all. With that, the counselor's projections faded. Tellurian returned to the command center, where the situation had deteriorated further. 2 more defensive platforms had fallen, and the Voidborn Vanguard was breaching the asteroid belt that served as Outpost Vega's final natural barrier. Change of plans, he announced. Lieutenant Nix, prepare a specialized communication probe. Science Officer Ilara, I need you to help me access restricted historical archives immediately. As Ilara worked, restricted files older than the assembly itself appeared on Tellurian's screen. Records of the Severance War, classified assessments of human military capabilities, psychological profiles explaining why isolation had been deemed the only safe option. By the Founders, whispered Ilara as she scanned the data. Is this accurate? A species that waged war against itself. Continuously, for most of their recorded history, Tellurian confirmed grimly, while simultaneously making technological leaps that should have taken millennia. And we're contacting them. Ilara's tendrils coiled tightly, a sign of extreme distress. The assembly exiled the humans because they were dangerous and unpredictable, Tellurian said. Now we need dangerous and unpredictable. Working rapidly, they prepared the specialized communication probe with the Council's authentication codes and a simple message, a request for military assistance against an enemy that threatened all sentient life, including humanity itself. Attached were comprehensive files on the Voidborn, their capabilities, patterns, and the devastation they had caused. Sir, Voidborn forces have breached the final defensive line, Security Chief Corvin reported. We have 13 minutes before they reach the station. Launch the probe, Tellurian ordered. The probe shot away from the outpost, instantly accelerating to superluminal speeds along a trajectory that would take it beyond assembly space, past the quarantine beacons, and toward the isolated region containing Earth and humanity's colony worlds. Now, Tellurian said, straightening himself to his full height, we buy time for the evacuees. Every minute counts. Hours turned into days as Outpost Vega fell. Tellurian and a skeleton crew managed to escape aboard the last transport, carrying with them the hope that their desperate message would reach its destination. As their ship limped toward assembly space, Tellurian spent long hours in his makeshift quarters, reviewing the classified files on humanity. He learned of their contradictions, their capacity for both boundless compassion and unspeakable cruelty, how they had developed nuclear weapons, then chosen not to use them against each other again after witnessing their destructive power, how they had fought wars over resources, ideology, and territory, yet still managed to unite enough to reach the stars. Most concerning were the technological assessments. The humans had been exiled when their technology was still primitive compared to the assemblies, but they had demonstrated an alarming rate of advancement. The projections of what 3 centuries of isolated development might have produced made Tellurian's spines quiver. 7 days after the fall of Outpost Vega, Tellurian's transport limped into Centauri Station, the assembly's final major stronghold. He was immediately summoned to a secure chamber where High Counselor Jen awaited. Commander, she greeted him, her voice weary. I'm relieved you survived. Many didn't, Tellurian replied tersely. Has there been any response? Nothing. The probe successfully penetrated the quarantine zone according to our long-range sensors, but we've received no communication from the human territories. Tellurian felt a wave of despair. Then it was for nothing. Perhaps, Jen acknowledged. But we've continued monitoring. There's been unusual activity within the quarantine zone. Energy signatures, spatial distortions. Something is happening, Commander. Before Tellurian could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber. High Counselor, unidentified vessels have appeared at the edge of the system. They hurried to the station's command center. The tactical display showed a formation of ships unlike anything Tellurian had ever seen. They were sleek, angular vessels with distinctive lines that suggested both function and aesthetics had been considered in their design. A stark contrast to the utilitarian assembly vessels and the chaotic, asymmetrical void-borne ships. Are they void-borne? Asked Jen. Negative, replied the sensor operator. These vessels don't match any known configuration. They're maintaining position just outside weapons range. We're receiving a transmission, announced the communications officer. Audio only, unknown language. Run it through the universal translator, ordered Jen. A moment later, a synthesized voice emerged from the speakers, the translator doing its best to interpret the unfamiliar language. The message was simple but sent chills through everyone present. This is Captain Maya Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Please provide battlefield intelligence and stand by for tactical coordination. The humans had arrived. When hunters become prey. The first meeting between human representatives and the Assembly Council was tense. Captain Maya Chen stood at the center of Centauri Station's Grand Council chamber, flanked by two officers. Unlike the varied physiologies of the assembly species, the humans appeared deceptively simple, bipedal mammals of average height with only minor variations in skin tone and facial features. But Tellurian, observing from his position beside High Counselor Jen, recognized the predatory alertness in their posture. Captain Chen was a compact woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform, a matte black affair with minimal insignia, seemed designed for functionality rather than ceremony. 300 years, she said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. That's how long we've been waiting for this moment. Jen shifted uncomfortably. You anticipated our contact. The cold smile touched Chen's lips. We knew you'd only break the quarantine under dire circumstances. We've been monitoring the Voidborn's advance for years. This revelation sent a ripple of shock through the chamber. Impossible, declared one counselor. The quarantine zone was impenetrable. To your technology, perhaps, replied Chen's executive officer, a tall man introduced as Commander Alvarez. We developed methods to passively observe assembly space shortly after our exile. It seemed prudent. Tellurian felt a chill. The humans had been watching them all along. If you knew about the Voidborn threat, Tellurian asked, why didn't you intervene earlier? Chen's gaze locked with his. The terms of our banishment were quite clear, Commander. Any unauthorized emergence from the quarantine zone would be considered an act of war against the Assembly. Yet you maintained your military capabilities, noted Jen. Of course we did, Chen replied without apology. Exile taught humanity a valuable lesson about trusting our survival to others. The implied rebuke hung in the air. The Assembly had cast humanity out, fearing their potential for violence and their rapid technological advancement. Now they needed those very qualities. What matters now? Chen continued, is defeating the Voidborn. To that end, I've brought our initial assessment and proposed strategy. She activated a holographic projector, displaying a detailed analysis of Voidborn tactics, strengths, and vulnerabilities. Observations more comprehensive than anything the Assembly had compiled in 18 cycles of warfare. Your approach has been fundamentally flawed, Chen explained. You've engaged the Voidborn as if they were a conventional enemy, using traditional warfare doctrines. The Voidborn operate as a networked intelligence, a hive mind. They don't think like individual species. We're aware of their collective consciousness, countered a counselor defensively. Awareness isn't understanding, Commander Alvarez interjected. You've been fighting symptoms, not the disease. Chen nodded in agreement. The void-born vessels aren't ships in the traditional sense. They're extensions of a singular entity. Destroying them piecemeal is inefficient. We need to target their communication network first, isolate the components, then eliminate them systematically. The tactical display shifted, showing a complex battle plan that involved electromagnetic warfare, targeted strikes at communication nodes, and the deployment of specialized weapons that the assembly had never seen before. This is unorthodox, Jen said cautiously. It's human, Chen corrected her. We specialize in asymmetric warfare. Part 2. When hunters become prey. The first meeting between human representatives and the Assembly Council was tense. Captain Maya Chen stood at the center of Centauri Station's Grand Council chamber, flanked by 2 officers. Unlike the varied physiologies of the assembly species, the humans appeared deceptively simple, bipedal mammals of average height with only minor variations in skin tone and facial features. But Tellurian, observing from his position beside High Counselor Zhen, recognized the predatory alertness in their posture. Captain Chen was a compact woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform, a matte black affair with minimal insignia, seemed designed for functionality rather than ceremony. 300 years, she said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. That's how long we've been waiting for this moment. Zhen shifted uncomfortably. You anticipated our contact. A cold smile touched Chen's lips. We knew you'd only break the quarantine under dire circumstances. We've been monitoring the Voidborn's advance for years. This revelation sent a ripple of shock through the chamber. Impossible, declared one counselor. The quarantine zone was impenetrable. To your technology, perhaps, replied Chen's executive officer, a tall man introduced as Commander Alvarez. We developed methods to passively observe assembly space shortly after our exile. It seemed prudent. Tellurian felt a chill. The humans had been watching them all along. If you knew about the Voidborn threat, Tellurian asked, why didn't you intervene earlier? Chen's gaze locked with his. The terms of our banishment were quite clear, Commander. Any unauthorized emergence from the quarantine zone would be considered an act of war against the Assembly. Yet you maintained your military capabilities, noted Chen. Of course we did, Chen replied without apology. Exile taught humanity a valuable lesson about trusting our survival to others. The implied rebuke hung in the air. The Assembly had cast humanity out, fearing their potential for violence and their rapid technological advancement. Now they needed those very qualities. What matters now, Chen continued, is defeating the Voidborn. To that end, I've brought our initial assessment and proposed strategy. She activated a holographic projector, displaying a detailed analysis of Voidborn tactics, strengths, and vulnerabilities. Observations more comprehensive than anything the Assembly had compiled in 18 cycles of warfare. Your approach has been fundamentally flawed, Chen explained. You've engaged the Voidborn as if they were a conventional enemy, using traditional warfare doctrines. The Voidborn operate as a networked intelligence, a hive mind. They don't think like individual species. We're aware of their collective consciousness, countered a counselor defensively. Awareness isn't understanding, Commander Alvarez interjected. You've been fighting symptoms, not the disease. Chen nodded in agreement. The Voidborn vessels aren't ships in the traditional sense. They're extensions of a singular entity. Destroying them piecemeal is inefficient. We need to target their communication network first, isolate the components, then eliminate them systematically. The tactical display shifted, showing a complex battle plan that involved electromagnetic warfare, targeted strikes at communication nodes, and the deployment of specialized weapons that the Assembly had never seen before. This is unorthodox, Jen said cautiously. It's human, Chen corrected her. We specialize in asymmetric warfare. In the days that followed, The humans began integrating their forces with what remained of the assembly fleet. 27 human vessels had arrived, a small number compared to the assembly's remaining ships, but Tellurian quickly realized that their technology was centuries beyond what the assembly possessed. Tellurian found himself assigned as liaison officer to the human flagship, the EDF Damascus. Working closely with Captain Chen, he witnessed firsthand the humans' approach to warfare. They were methodical yet creative, disciplined yet adaptable. Most disturbingly, they seemed to understand the Voidborn in ways the assembly never had. "How did you learn so much about them?" Tellurian asked Chen as they reviewed battle plans in the Damascus's tactical center. Chen was silent for a moment. "We encountered them before." Before? Tellurian's spines flared in surprise. The Voidborn only appeared 18 cycles ago. In assembly space, yes, Chen agreed. They entered the quarantine zone 32 years ago. A scout force, we believe. They attacked an outer colony of ours. We destroyed them. Tellurian stared at her in disbelief. The assembly has lost billions of lives, hundreds of worlds. Target their communication nodes, Chen ordered, her voice calm but intense. Execution pattern Alpha. The human vessels unleashed weapons unlike anything Tellurian had seen before. Directed energy beams that seemed to ignore conventional shielding, missiles that phased in and out of normal space, and autonomous combat drones that swarmed the larger Voidborn vessels. "They're retreating," Tellurian announced in amazement as the Voidborn fleet began withdrawing from Helios Prime's orbit. Chen's expression remained grim. "Not retreating. Regrouping. They're adaptive. They'll find countermeasures. We need to press the advantage." And press they did. Over the next 2 months, the combined human assembly forces launched a series of coordinated strikes against Voidborn-controlled systems. With each engagement, the humans refined their tactics, adjusting to the Voidborn's evolutionary responses. What surprised Tellurian most was not the humans' technology, but their mindset. They approached warfare not as a series of set-piece battles, but as a psychological campaign. They studied the Voidborn, predicted their adaptations, and remained consistently one step ahead. "You're treating them as an intelligence," Tellurian observed after a particularly successful operation, "not just an enemy." "Know thy enemy," Chen quoted. An ancient human military philosopher named Sun Tzu. "Understanding the Voidborn psychology is key to defeating them." I wasn't aware they had a psychology. "Everything that thinks has patterns," Chen explained. "The Voidborn are no exception. Their hive mind creates predictable responses once you understand their underlying logic. They're not used to being hunted." The word choice wasn't lost on Tellurian. "And humans are hunters." Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We evolved as apex predators, Commander. We never forgot how to stalk prey." As the campaign progressed, Tellurian began to understand why the assembly had feared humanity. It wasn't just their capacity for violence. Many species were violent. It was their intuitive grasp of it, the precision with which they applied force, the creativity they brought to destruction. 3 months after the humans' arrival, intelligence located the Voidborn's central hub, an enormous structure orbiting a dying star in a system the assembly had abandoned decades earlier. This was where the Voidborn's central consciousness resided, coordinating their fleets across the galaxy. The Assembly Council was divided on how to proceed. Some advocated for a massive assault with all remaining forces. Others suggested a strategic retreat to consolidate their gains. The humans proposed a third option: a small strike team. Chen explained to the Council. A specialized force with a single objective: deliver a quantum destabilization device to the central hub. While the main fleet engages their defensive forces, the strike team infiltrates and plants the device. "Suicide mission," muttered one counselor. "High risk," Chen acknowledged. "High reward." "And who would undertake such a mission?" asked Chen. Chen's answer was simple: "My team. And Commander Tellurian, if he's willing." Tellurian didn't hesitate. I am. The mission was set for what humans called 0 hour, the darkest point of night, though in space such distinctions were meaningless. Tellurian found himself aboard a stealth insertion craft with Captain Chen and 4 human special operators. They were each equipped with advanced combat suits that made them look more machine than organic. These will protect against the Voidborn's environmental weapons, explained Chen as she helped Tellurian adjust his suit. And the neural disruptors will shield your mind from their attempts at psionic penetration. As their ship detached from the Damascus and slipped into the void, Tellurian felt a strange calm descend. Around them, the combined fleet was engaging the Voidborn defenses, a massive battle designed to draw attention away from their small craft. "Why did you include me?" Tellurian asked Chen as they approached the massive central hub. "I'm not trained for this type of operation." Chen checked her weapons, a sleek rifle and several devices Tellurian couldn't identify. "Because when this is over, the assembly needs to understand what happened here. There needs to be a witness." The infiltration went according to plan until they reached the central chamber. The Voidborn hub wasn't just a structure, it was a living thing, a massive neural network encased in synthetic material. And at its center pulsed a core of pure energy, the collective consciousness of the Voidborn entity. "This is different than we expected," Chen muttered, studying the core. "The quantum device needs to be placed directly within the neural matrix." "That's suicide," said one of her operatives. "The radiation levels are off the charts." Chen nodded grimly. "I'll do it." "Captain," Tellurian began. "This isn't up for debate, Commander," she cut him off. "Get your people clear. The device has a 2-minute timer once activated." Before anyone could argue further, the chamber shuddered violently. The Voidborn had detected them. Mechanical guardians, constructs designed to protect the core, emerged from recessed chambers. "Go," Chen ordered her team. "Complete the mission." What followed was chaos. The human operatives engaged the guardians with devastating efficiency, while Chen made her way toward the core, quantum device in hand. Tellurian found himself fighting alongside humans, witnessing firsthand their legendary combat capabilities. They moved like predators, efficient, ruthless, precise. When one of the operatives fell, the others adjusted instantly, covering the gap without hesitation or emotional reaction. It was terrifying and impressive in equal measure. Through the melee, Tellurian saw Chen reach the core. She was installing the device when a guardian breached their defensive line. Without thinking, Tellurian charged forward, intercepting the construct before it could reach her. "It's done," Chen called out. 2 minutes. Everyone out now. The surviving team members fought their way back to the insertion craft. Chen was the last aboard, her combat suit smoking from exposure to the core's radiation. As their craft accelerated away from the hub, Tellurian could see the massive structure beginning to destabilize. "Quantum cascade initiated," reported one of the operatives, monitoring readings from the hub. 30 seconds to complete neural dissolution. The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything Tellurian had witnessed. The hub didn't simply detonate. It collapsed inward, folding in on itself before releasing a pulse of energy that rippled outward. Throughout the battlefield, Voidborn vessels suddenly went dark, drifting aimlessly without the central intelligence guiding them. In the aftermath, as assembly and human ships methodically eliminated the now defenseless Voidborn remnants, Tellurian found Chen in the Damascus's medical bay. Her exposure to the core's radiation had been severe. "Will you recover?" he asked. "Eventually," she replied, her voice weak but determined. "Human medicine has come a long way in 300 years. The assembly owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid," Tellurian said solemnly. Chen studied him for a long moment. "What happens now, Commander? Does the assembly intend to send us back into exile once we're no longer needed?" It was the question Tellurian had been dreading. The Council had been deliberately vague about humanity's post-war status. Some members argued that the original reasons for exile remained valid, perhaps even more so, given the technological and military capabilities humans had demonstrated. That decision hasn't been made, Tellurian admitted, but I will speak on humanity's behalf. You didn't just save us. You showed us a different way of thinking. Perhaps that's what the Assembly has needed all along. Chen smiled faintly. You know why we were really exiled, don't you? It wasn't our violence or our technology. It was that we refused to conform. The Assembly wanted uniformity, predictability. Humanity has always been neither. Tellurian couldn't disagree. The Assembly had valued stability above all else, a philosophy that had left them vulnerable to an enemy as adaptive as the Voidborn. 3 weeks later, Tellurian stood before the full Assembly Council as they debated humanity's future. Captain Chen had recovered enough to attend, standing tall despite her recent injuries. We propose a full repeal of the exile decree, Jen announced, her voice echoing through the chamber, and extend an invitation for humanity to join the Assembly as full members. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. There were still those who feared human unpredictability. But the majority had spoken. 3 centuries of isolation were officially ended. We accept your invitation, Chen said when called upon to respond. With conditions. Humanity will retain its independence and its right to self-defense. We will be allies, partners, but not subjects. As the council session concluded, Tellurian approached Chen. What will you do now, Captain? Chen gazed out at the stars visible through the station's vast windows. The Voidborn were only one threat among many in this universe, Commander. Humanity spent 300 years preparing for challenges we couldn't predict. That won't change. And what about me? Tellurian asked, surprising himself with the question.